Okay, let's dive in. For this deep dive, we're really focusing on insights from a specific source, looking at Donald Trump's presidency and, well, its effect on global governance.
And it's important how the source defines that term, global governance. It's not talking about, a world government.
Right, not at all. It's more like this framework, a web of rules, institutions, agreements, the kind of things that govern trade, climate, security, just keeping things relatively stable globally.
And the source really zeroes in on what it presents as Trump's core philosophy towards that system.
Yeah.
Deep skepticism of globalism.
Yeah, driven by this idea of United States prioritized. That's the phrase used.
Exactly. And the source goes quite deep on this, suggesting he didn't primarily see international bodies as like tools for working together.
More like the source uses the word parasites, something draining U.S. strength or resources.
Which the material frames as a pretty major disruption,
Yeah.
basically turning the established way of doing things on its head.
It definitely raises that question, which the source explores. What happens when a key player kind of steps back from that cooperative model?
Hmm.
And the source gets specific. So we're going to look at what it says about pulling out of big agreements, shifts in trade, changes in security alliances. So let's get into what the source actually laid out.
Okay, so looking at agreements first, the source highlights several key moments. It talks about the U.S. withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement.
Big one.
Huge. And leaving the Iran nuclear deal.
Mm-hmm.
Also pulling out of the World Health Organization, the WHO.
Right.
And the material even mentions discussions, maybe thinking about leaving the World Trade Organization, the WTO, too.
So you see this pattern emerging in the source material, this preference for maybe unilateral action over these big multilateral setups.
That's how it's presented. Then there's trade. The source spends a lot of time here.
Yeah, it details initiating a trade conflict, especially with China.
Right, and imposing tariffs. And not just on perceived adversaries, but on allies, too, which was controversial.
And that whole renegotiation of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, turning it into the USMCA.
And it's interesting, the source itself points out that these trade moves were seen differently by different people at the time.
How so?
Well, some framed it as, smart strategic planning for the economy. Others saw it more simply as protectionism. The source just notes both views were out there.
That's crucial. The source is reporting the different interpretations, not picking a side itself.
Exactly. Then you have security, alliances. The source describes quite a bit of disruption there, particularly with NATO.
The North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Yeah, the source recounts how Trump was portrayed, accusing allies of not paying enough.
Not meeting their financial commitments and expressing maybe hesitation about automatically defending them, that automatic guarantee.
Which the material says caused a lot of nervousness among traditional allies.
Understandably. The source also notes what it describes as a perceived preference for dealing with more authoritarian leaders.
And how is that framed in the source?
Well, the source says sometimes it was presented as showing strength, but other perspectives highlighted in the material suggested it could, undermine trust in the U.S. internationally.
When you look at the source's overall take, what really comes through is its argument that the goal wasn't necessarily to reform global governance.
But more to fundamentally step away from it.
Yeah.
That's the core idea presented.
Right. And the source notes supporters often saw this as like taking back sovereignty, being independent.
While critics, presented in the source, tended to view it as potentially leading to more disorder, maybe isolation.
So whatever side you might fall on, the source's main conclusion seems pretty clear.
Yeah, it argues that this period really showed how much global cooperation depends on the big players actually, wanting to play ball. It revealed a certain fragility in that whole structure we talked about.
Okay, so just to quickly recap the main points from the source. We saw withdrawals from major agreements, Paris, Iran deal, WHO, big shifts on trade, the conflict with China, tariffs, rewriting NAFTA.
Right, and the disruptions described within NATO and other alliances.
And importantly, the source makes sure to show those different interpretations floating around, was trade policy strategy or protectionism. Did the approach to alliances show strength or erode trust?
The source lays out these different viewpoints alongside the events, but its central theme is how all this tested the existing system, kind of showing its seam, revealing that underlying fragility.
Which really brings us to a final thought, something drawn right from the source's reflections for you, the listener, to think about. Based on the source's account, how should we view this approach? Was it a necessary, maybe even courageous adjustment for global governance? Or was it more of a risky withdrawal that just highlighted how vulnerable the whole thing is?